Okay, so we are back with Kabbalah of the Afterlife, and we are talking about the stages of afterlife. We said it's not a linear process. We said it's not just stages, but what we're doing is we created a linear process so that you can understand it a little better. But what this is, based on NDEs, based on near-death experiences, we have created some stages of the afterlife. Stage one was the awareness of death. Stage two is what we're going to get into today. We're going to call it peacefulness. So in this second stage, the stage of peacefulness, the person realizes that they are no longer among the living. And a sense of peacefulness and painlessness sets in. You see, even up until the point of death, they may have been experiencing fear or apprehension. And the moment they sense the soul leaving the body, there's a complete absence of any type of anxiety, any type of fright, any type of panic. Death, according to the Talmud, is like removing a strand of hair from a cup of milk. Death is like removing a strand of hair from a cup of milk. This is what the Talmud in Brachot says. It describes the process of the soul of the righteous leaving the body. It's not always the case. Occasionally, the process of the soul exiting the body is similar to trying to pull a tangled rope through a narrow opening. Again, metaphor. Or here's a good one for you from the Psalms: withdrawing embedded thistles from a sheep's wool. Essentially, it depends on the level of spiritual integration the person is at in the moment of death. Is depending on how difficult it's going to be for the soul to be removed from this world. Now, at some point later, we're going to discuss why some people, although optimistically speaking, these people are few in number, experience fear and experience anguish while the soul is wrestling itself out of the physical form. But that's not anyone here. It's people who, for those of you who have ever had an experience with Jill, what do you do?
Acupuncture.
Thank you. Acupuncture. I don't know why I just lost it for a second. Anyone who's ever done acupuncture, you know that when the needle hits the skin, the natural reaction is to cringe, to expect the pain. But what the acupuncturist, the Jills of the world will tell you is that just let it be. And it's not going to be painful. It's not really painful. And so I think that that's a really good metaphor for the soul leaving the body. Like, it's almost like the fear is not real. It's just this imagined fear, because usually needles piercing skin creates a pain. But obviously the acupuncturist knows where to put the needle, and what it's doing is it's releasing the energy in the right place. I hope I said that correctly. And so the same thing, I think it's a great metaphor because it's exactly the same thing with the soul leaving the body. It's that the soul leaving the body, it knows the right way to leave. It's just that the body, because of the potential fear, is going to hold it back. But it's an imagined fear. It's not a real fear. For the most part, the transition from one life to the next is smooth. It's painless. It's peaceful. By the way, someone asked me where that psalm is. That's Psalm 11, verse 6. So stage 2 is this peacefulness, and it's allowing the peacefulness to exist. And it's allowing the soul to be able to create that transition. The more we anticipate it, the more we worry about it, the more we become entangled in it, the less that we allow it to be. And so it's so important to allow that second stage, that state of peacefulness. I want to go on to stage 3, and then we'll go to questions. Stage 3, we're going to call sounds. Again, these are coming from NDEs. In this stage, many people who have had NDEs report hearing an uncomfortable hissing sound. Undoubtedly, this noise, as people explain, has no physical property. It has no physical resonance. Otherwise, everyone around them would hear it. Pleasant and acoustic sounds and harmonious music appear to universally represent a sense of cosmic order. On the opposite, acoustic dissonance and disharmony symbolize an atmosphere of chaos, of agony. Right? If someone's singing and you sing along, that's called harmony. If someone is talking and you interrupt them, it's called interrupting. It's called disharmony. And so there's some kind of a pleasant harmony that exists in order to create a cosmic order. Now, there's no direct or explicit explanation within the sources. The Talmud actually does mention sounds that the soul generates when leaving the body. The Talmud also speaks of the cosmic noise created by the movement of the celestial spheres. It's a beautiful Talmud. If you ever want to look it up, it's in Yuma 20b. The hissing we're speaking of may be somewhat related to this cosmic sound. And ultimately, when it's heard as pleasant or annoying, I guess it depends on the spiritual stature of the individual, how connected the person is with their body and how disconnected they are with the physical world. Right? Which is why it's a wonderful process as we age to disconnect ourselves from physical things, from the physical world. We're not as worried about our connection and our process, right? Even physically, some people will downsize their homes. Some people will start doing life spring cleaning, where they purge things. And the more we do that as we age, it's much better, because what we're doing is we're physically removing ourselves from physical things. And essentially, what we want to do is we want to remove ourselves as much as possible as we age from physical things, because it's going to allow us to create that transition. So right now we have 3 of 10 steps. We've gone through being aware of death. We've gone through stage 2 of peacefulness, and now stage 3, which we're going to call the sounds. Questions, comments?
Rabbi?
Yeah.
With the sounds, you said harmonious sounds are indicate a more peaceful order. So will the person, depending on how they've either lived their life or in these last moments, like, will the sounds correlate with how they are?
It's hard to know. It's hard to know because, again, we're going based on NDEs.
Sure.
So you're talking about more of an afterlife experience, not necessarily an NDE.
Okay.
So it's hard to be able for anyone to properly answer that question. It seems that these it's some kind of like hissing sound. It's not
Okay.
necessarily that you're hearing Chopin.
Sure. But hissing sounds can have different energy to it, whether it's
Right,
a
right.
chaotic energy, hissing, or more melodic. We
I'm
don't
just
have
gonna
that differentiation.
I'm gonna take an educated jump here and say it really depends on the soul's relationship with this world. Which means if the soul is in chaos when it's going through that transition, then there'll probably be some chaotic hissing sound. I mean, I'm just this is totally an educated
Right.
guess here.
Okay.
But based on, I mean, it's educated, which means based on what I've seen, both in the NDEs and in the Kabbalah and in the Talmud, it seems that it would make sense that the experience that the soul has leaving the body is similar to its experience. So it would make sense that if that there's a cacophony of noise, if there's a cacophony of spirit.
But we don't have any indication from people that have come back with from NDs about that sound, if it was, or they don't get there because of
Nothing that I've seen. Maybe you can find
okay.
something else, but nothing that I've seen. No, nothing anecdotally, and nothing that I've researched that I know of.
Okay. Thank you.
The question just came in privately. Is this when the soul starts the cleansing process? Yes, it's the first step. This is the first step, the first stage. Essentially, the peacefulness is the first stage. But yes, this is the first stage of the cleansing process. And that's why it's so important for that to be something that is, that again, similar. I think I really like that analogy of the acupuncture of like when you're expecting the needle to hit the skin, that it needs to know that it's just an imagined pain. It's not an actual pain.
Are
I have
you
a question.
saying the opposite as well? That if there's a pleasant noise, that's because of a well organized, well integrated.
I would agree with that. If it's a pleasant noise, then it's well organized, well integrated, and well connected. Absolutely, on a spiritual level. Yeah, yeah. And again, and I think somebody just mentioned about panic. Would if they can imagine themselves, it would only be because of their kids and not being there for their children. And I agree with that. But also that's part of why and being someone who's been able to have the privilege of being with families during those most difficult moments. And I'm hearing children say, mom, dad, it's okay, we'll be okay, you can go. And I think that that's probably part of that process of for a parent to be able to be let go by their children. So I think that's something that doesn't come from the parent but rather comes from the children. And I think it's a very good point. Very, very good point. We had some other questions. Yeah, Cheryl, please.
This is a little forward thinking, but if you wanted to die and know that you wanted to reconnect with people that are still living, is there a way that you could make a pact or an agreement ahead of time to say, okay, when a light bulb flickers, that's me? Or, I mean, have you ever gotten any kind of information on that? Because I really do want to come back and visit my people here.
So I'm going to tell you the Kabbalistic answer, and then I'm going to tell you my father's favorite joke.
Thanks. Okay.
In that order. So Kabbalistically, we would say that if that pact would happen, it would be very painful for the soul to do. I'm not saying that the Cheryls
Whose soul? Whose soul?
the person who's passed.
The person
So
who's
I'm not going to
passed.
say the Cheryls of the world won't want to go through that pain. Some people would, and some people do, but you should just know that it's very, very painful.
Oh, I thought it was painful for the people that you're connecting with.
No, it's
Oh, it's
comforting.
painful.
It's comforting for the people you're connecting with.
Right. Okay.
Now, my father's favorite joke. Saul and Henry, they're best friends, and they love hanging out, but they love one thing more than everything else. They love baseball. They're getting older, and they have one question: is there baseball in heaven? And they made a pact with one another. Whoever goes first is going to come back and tell the other if there's baseball in heaven. Surely enough, Saul goes, and Henry's waiting. He's waiting. Saul made the promise. He wants to know if there's baseball in heaven. A couple days later, he's sleeping. All of a sudden, he hears, psst, psst, Henry. Henry. Hey, Saul, is that you? Yeah, it's me. So tell me. Is there baseball in heaven? It's Henry. I have good news and bad news. So tell me, what's the good news? The good news is there's baseball and there's lots of it. So what's the bad news? You're pitching Tuesday.
That predates you,
I know.
because I know that joke.
I told
How
you
old's your-
it's my father's favorite joke, so it definitely predates me. He tells it much better than me, though. Okay. Any other questions?
So I can't make a pact with Bruce ahead of time that if blah, blah, blah happens, it's me. If I go first.
You can make the pact, but you may not want to go through that pain. If it's the kids, it's one thing, but Bruce, you want to go through that pain. I'm joking. But yes, you never know. I don't want to give you any ideas. Sava, please.
Well, first of all, I love that joke. I every time you tell it, I laugh like I heard it for the first time. Could you just elaborate for a moment about? You say it's painful for the soul who's passed, and painful is a tough word for me to comprehend in this framework because it's such a human experience word. Could you
Right.
just elaborate about maybe using different words?
So what would be a word that you would want to use?
Well, it's not that I want or don't want. I'm just, I guess, painful. How?
It takes a tremendous amount of energy for a soul to communicate with us.
Yeah. I mean, I can call it Kajumaba, but what does that mean to you? I mean, I'm just making up a word.
Yeah, I think I've expressed that incorrectly. I don't have a problem with the word pain. I'm just trying to understand. So, Alessandro, when you say it takes a lot of energy, and that energy is distracting the soul maybe from what it's supposed to be doing,
from their cleansing process, etc., etc. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but thank you for the clarification, because I know that it's hard to use words in this world for metaphors that are not in this world, but we don't have a choice. It's not an option that we have. We have to use we have to use these words as metaphors, because any other word wouldn't make any sense to us. Any
Makes
other
sense.
questions?
I think they would have to have something very, 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 very serious to communicate, to put themselves through the excruciating level of energy it requires them to communicate with us.
Right. Though I do believe, and again, I don't have, this is just anecdotally, that there are souls of our loved ones who have passed away, and they are communicating with each other with regard to us. Maybe they don't communicate with us, but they communicate with each other. I have a beautiful story of a couple I know that just got engaged, and they've both gone through such difficulties with relationships in their life, and they found out their grandmother passed away a number of years ago. The other one, the mother, passed away, and they found out the mother and the grandmother were friends, and that about 8 or 9 years ago, the two of them actually had suggested this match to each other. Like they both weren't ready. And I said, there's no doubt in my mind that they both went up to heaven. Finally, they're walking the paths and like, hey, what's going on with your daughter? Oh, what's going on with your grandson? Oh, well, what's happening over here? And I'm sure they conspired with each other, and as a result, these two just got engaged. That there's no doubt in my mind about that. And that way, they didn't have to actually go through the pain of coming and connecting with the person here. They just conspired it amongst themselves, and as a result, the universe, because we don't believe, it's not, again, I'll say it again, it's not afterlife, it's life, the continuation of life. So their world and our world is one and the same. You don't have to necessarily communicate with someone in this world to have that experience with someone in this world. You can communicate with someone in that world, but it's the continuation of life. So it's all the same. It's just you and I can't see it. Kelsey, please.
So I have a question about the Witch of Endor. You know what I'm talking about? She Saul comes to her and wants to summon Samuel.
Yes, the witches, yes.
And then, she finds out who Saul is and that, God just wasn't answering him. I'm summarizing all of this, but
yes, the story.
She's very
the story of Saul and the witch. Very important story that's in the prophets. Believe it's in the book of Samuel.
Yes. And she's very upset that Saul, was deceitful about who he was and why he was coming to her. And so I'm just kind of curious as far as like, to me, I've always read that story as you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't touch that. Samuel wasn't happy about being summoned and she wasn't happy to be doing the summoning.
Right. That's a good example. That's a great example.
Okay.
I mean, I can tell you other stories that where the soul was happy to be summoned for different reasons, because the soul may have been in limbo or the soul may have been experiencing some pain. And so as a result, they were summoned. I mean, I don't want to go through all those stories now, but so there's other stories that would contradict that, but that's a good example of the pain that the soul has to go through and why it wouldn't be happy to be summoned.
Okay. I guess, yeah, I always read it as kind of like you just need to accept and let it be in a different realm, I guess.
Right.
So thank you for just like, talking about that.
Alessandra.
My stepmother, who I believe I have already talked about, tells me that there's a whole team of souls protecting me on a different plane. And it's always the same person connecting with us to tell me what I should be aware of and what to do. And what is unbelievable is that I have seen, I believe you've met my stepmother, she's Brazilian.
Yes,
She's nothing to do with Judaism. And I have seen my stepmother taken over speaking Hebrew to me.
Wow. And she doesn't know Hebrew at all. Right.
Not
You told me
knowing
about this. Yeah.
Yeah. And me being told that I had to do the Shema Israel, and they made me do the Shema Israel in front of them.
Wow. Yeah. So there's another example. I mean, look, these things do exist. We can't ignore them. Now, the question that Kabbalah will have is from what there's something called Zeh Umat Zeh. There's from which dimension did they come? Was it a positive force or a negative force? I mean, we can go, it's a different conversation for a different time, but I think it's important to be able to have that differentiation, that some of this stuff comes from a good place, some of it comes from a not place, even though it's the same destination. So we have to be careful. Somebody was saying they were playing with a Ouija board, and I was saying, be careful from where it comes. And when you do these kind of things, you don't always have control over from where it comes.
But you know what? She has no control when it comes.
Right, but some people have I was gonna say a caveat to that is some people have a natural connection towards it, and so it's different than summoning it or playing with Ouija boards or etc. When someone has it naturally and they're intuitively are able to do it themselves.
It's the reason why she didn't come to Naomi's bat mitzvah. Was afraid.
I remember that.
She was scared.
Yeah, I remember that. Let's just do a quick nugget. Alessandro, why don't you start?
Well, the peaceful, I can relate to that, but what is more interesting to me is the hissing sound.
Oh.
And that it's connected to your state of mind at the time it happens. And I couldn't help by connecting it to when I had my car crash and everything went blank and I had none of the NDE experience. So I had just lost consciousness, obviously. But to me, everything went blank. But when I say blank, it's like physical blank and no sound, no nothing, just blank. And coming back to my senses, I had this sense of where I am. I started touching myself to see if I had any feeling, to know if I was still in the physical world or not. And that's what, you know, that's the experience it recalled in me when you spoke about the sound. I haven't heard any, but that's what it woke up in me. So I'll have to maybe process that a bit. And I will pass it to Marianne.
Oh, Marianne just walked in. Maybe pass it to someone else because she literally just walked in. She doesn't know who we're speaking.
Okay. So, Julian.
Thank you. There was two things I was wondering. Firstly, the people that have got a natural affinity with the other realm or the Ouija board or however you'd express it, does that mean that they've been doing it in their previous life when they shouldn't have been, and so they've still retained the ability in this life, in their next life? And the other thing was just a comment that the thing about the baseball, I can imagine that like the idea of baseball might be in heaven, but not the practice. But I don't know what you'd say about those two things, particularly the Ouija board one, which I'm very
the answer is yes and yes, and I have more to say about it, but we'll pass it around.
Oh yeah, got to
If
pick
you want
up.
to pass it on.
Yeah, it's a luxury for me because I've never had the chance to have so many people to pick from. I'm always normally at the end. I've got to think in new ways to pick someone. So I'm just looking through. Oh, didn't hear what that was, but so I'm gonna pick Ilana.
Somebody sounds very cute. I mean, I'm not a big believer in the afterlife, but to me, if we're ready to leave and we leave peacefully and the soul is content, like we've done our job on earth, I'm kind of okay with that. I'll pass to Cheryl. Thank you.
Thanks, Elena. I agree with what you said. That was really important. If the soul leaves peacefully, I'm sorry I can't make a deal ahead of time with somebody so that I could let them know I'm okay and I go. But my other nugget didn't have to do with the stages so much, but it had to do with the wedding and the Noahites. So I'm just fascinated with that, and I want to do a little more research on that and piggyback on Alessandra. You have the most amazing stories and the intuitive family and the messages that you get. I just like hearing your stories because I know they're real and things that you've experienced, and that's something I draw on. So thank you for sharing. I will pass it to Jill.
Thanks, Cheryl. So since you brought up acupuncture early, I've been thinking about these different scenarios and really just how powerful our mind is in any direction. And like I see three types of people. And one, needles doesn't matter. I can put any amount of needles, they're fine. Then there's the type of person who is really nervous and can't look at the needles, don't want to see it. But once I put them in, they're like, oh, this is nothing. This is okay. And then they're incredibly relaxed. But then there's the few people that I've had that are so extremely nervous that it get them up on the table and it's a like a PTSD type of thing, even though they don't have that experience with needles. And I might get a needle into them and it's just sends them into a panicky place and they can't do this kind of treatment. But it just really shows me, like, if we try to prepare ourselves for this guarantee that we are all going to be going to the other side and to try to work it to hopefully be a peaceful death and dying and whatever's after. I like that. I like that point of view. I've been watching this hospice nurse on Instagram who talks about it, and she talks about a lot of the peaceful experiences that she witnesses. So I think that's what I take, just try to somehow get ourselves into a place while we're living, so hopefully while we're going is okay. So I will pass it to Kelsey.
Thank you. I like how you just put all of that, Jill. Thank you for sharing that. And Jillian, thank you for your notes. That was very helpful to me today. I found it interesting. I mean, I enjoyed the class today, just the conversation. I found it interesting about the purging of physical things, because over the last several months, we've been traveling, and so we purged before that, and then now we really don't have too much of a desire to get things out of storage, other than like the necessities. And so I just find that interesting. And I will pass to Hava.
Thank you. I'm really interested in the piece of Talmud that you mentioned, Rabbi, about it sounded to me kind of like the music of the spheres, the idea of the resonance of celestial bodies and the sounds that are imperceptible to to the human ear, but maybe perceptible to the soul. I think that would be my nugget that I'd love to investigate further. MJ.
Yes, thank you. My nuggets is the beginning part when we talked about the Noah's hide and all this conversation. I even felt like, wow, I came right on time. I love that conversation. Concerning the other part is actually the how did the rabbi say that, when he said to be prudent into anyways, just an analogy or that says to be prudent and to be careful, which I want to say energy, I'm not sure that's the right word, but and that is my nugget.
Cheryl, do you have a chance? Okay, so I think that was everybody. Okay, well, right? Yeah. Well, it was really really an honor, and I definitely will plan a time where we can do a deep dive into Noah hides, because I know it seems after this wedding that I did that everybody's interested in it. So I'm going to try to plan a time upon my return, and just to remind you that next week Rabbi Tzvi will be with you but I don't want you to not come, because
Oh,
this is a when you have a set time for study, it's a very important thing, and I don't want to let that be interrupted in any way, shape, or form. So don't interrupt it, and I know that it's going to be a lot of fun and very informative, and I will see you on my return.
Have a
Safe
safe
travels.
trip.
Thank you.
Yeah, safe
Oh.
travels.
Look forward to hearing about it. I think our class upon returning, you need to debrief us.
I will. I will.
Yes.
do that.
Yes, and the beginning of your new congregation.
Yes, thank
I'll be
you.
number 2.
Bye bye.
I'll be number 2. All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
It's so strange that the Noachides is like a secret subject.
It's
But
not
no one-
secret at all. I don't think it's secret at all. It's just for some reason, people don't talk about it enough. It's not at all secret. There's nothing secret
Oh.
about Noahides.
Oh, what I was going to say, even though it hasn't been banned, it's
Right.
like no one knows about it.
Yeah, but it's funny. I guess because it's such an old tradition, so it'd be very interesting to. I'm gonna do. I want to do a proper research and do like a proper deep dive into it. But it's such a fascinating discussion. In any case, let's move on to Talmud.